Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I created this circle text hover effect in CSS and JavaScript. The full source code is available on CodePen. Enjoy. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just create the navigation menu with the links in. We'll have home, about, services and contact. And we're just going to add a bit of styles to this just to make it look a bit nicer. Cool, so now we've got the basic navigation. We're now going to work on the basic cursor effect. So I'm going to create a div for the cursor. I want a small circle with a background color of white. Now we can put this in the HTML and we should see our circle. Cool. So what I'm also going to do is add position absolute to this. So this just means that the position won't affect anything else on the page, and when we come to add in our event listener, we can position the cursor to match our cursor. So I'm just going to add in a reference to that div for the cursor that we've added using query selector. And now what we want to do is obviously move this dot that's going to be our new cursor to wherever our actual cursor is. So if we add an event listener to the document, so whenever the mouse is moved, we want to have the event passed in, and we can change the cursor style left. We want to be the cursor position from the actual event. So I believe I've got the wrong event there. And we also need to add in pixels because the event client X and Y will just be a number, whereas the CSS will want it to be in pixels. And obviously we want that to be top. Cool. So now we're going to subtract the width of the actual cursor circle from the mouse position so that we can get the circle to be in the middle of the actual cursor. So to do this, I'm just going to subtract the offset width, divide that by 2, and then do the same here for top, but we're going to subtract the offset height divided by 2. And now, as you can see, the circle is in the middle. I'm just going to add some more styles as well, just so that the original cursor isn't shown. Cool, so now we can work on a few more of the kind of cursor effects. So I'm going to add this after pseudo element to add in the circle around the outside of the cursor. So for a pseudo element, you always need to have some sort of display and then content, but in our case, it's going to be blank. Now I'm going to set the width and the height of this to be 35 pixels, so it should give us this nice kind of outline effect. This is going to be positioned relative to the cursor, and we're going to give it a border of 2 pixels, and we want it to be white. And then obviously we've got to add the border radius to make it a circle again. Cool. So we've got this kind of basic outline effect. We're just going to add a left and top so that this sort of border is now in the center. Cool. So now we've got this kind of almost target looking cursor. So next what we want to do is set an active class on the cursor whenever it hovers over a link, and this is going to give us kind of like the base to start adding the circle text animation. So I'm just going to add a active class to the cursor so that we know if it's been added. We'll set it background red just so we can see something quite obvious change once we hover. Okay, so the next step is we're going to first remove the active class from the cursor, and this will make sense a little bit sort of later on. And then we need to check if the cursor is actually hovering over a link. So we're going to add a list of elements that we are hovering over. from the cursor point. So we want the event client X and the event client Y. And then we want to loop over all of these elements that we found. And then we want to check if the element tag name is a link. Okay, so if the element is a link, now we want to add in the active class to the cursor. And we just want to fix this bug here. We just want to remove the class list there. So now, as you can see, whenever we hover over a link, we get the active class. If I were to remove this section here, when we hover over a link and then unhover over a link, we've still got that active class, which is why we need to remove that there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is to change these styles so it's not just the red background, and we're going to add the growing border and opacity effects. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add a transition to the cursor for the background. We'll make this quite a quick transition, and then when the cursor is active, we just want to set the background to be transparent. And then, as you can see, it kind of eases out. So then we're going to also want to add the effects for the pseudo element. So when the cursor is active and the pseudo element, we're going to want the opacity to be 0, and we're going to add a scale increase of 2. And then we're also going to need to add in the transitions to this, which will be for the opacity and the transform. And we're going to make the transform a longer transition so that you can see more of the kind of scale effect. Cool. So now that we've got this working, the next thing that we can work on is the text. So to do this, I'm going to add in a div inside of here for the circle text, and this is going to be very similar to the previous video that I did with the text wrapping around a circle and the animation. So I'm going to add a reference to the circle text. So the next thing we want to do is to actually add our text into our new div. So we're going to loop over the inner HTML, so that's just going to pull out the text of the link, so home, about, services, or contact. We're going to want to split this into an array and then loop over each letter, and we're going to want to pull out the index as well. And then we can start doing the same things we did in the last video. So we can add our circle letters, add the class, and then we're going to want to set the inner HTML for each of these to the individual letter that we've then pulled out. And the last thing we're going to want to do is to add the circle letter to our circle text. So as you can see there, this has crashed. So the reason that it's crashed is because it's constantly appending this new child on. So the inner HTML of circle text would have got too big. So we're just going to want to clear the inner HTML every time this runs. And of course, we're going to want to move all of this into that if statement. So it's only going to run if it is a link. So now, as you can see, when we hover over, we can see the text in the cursor from the link. So the next thing we're going to want to do is make this text wrap around our circle. So we're going to do something very similar to what we did in the last video. So now we're going to want to center these circle letters. So we're going to take half of our circle size, which in this case is going to be 25 pixels. And we're going to want to minus the letter width, which in our case is 14 pixels. So now these are centered. We're also going to need to move them up slightly. So when we add the transform, all of the text will be wrapped around the circle. Now we've done this, we can add the rotation to each of these circle letters. and we're going to use the index, and we're going to times this by, let's try 14 pixels. So now you can see it's starting to come together with the circled text. So now what we're going to want to do is add the circle letter bottom text. So there's two iterations of the word wrapping around the circle. And then add this to our circle letter. And then obviously we're going to want to add the styles in for this so that it sits on the bottom of our red div. And we're also going to want to rotate it 180 degrees so that it's readable. And then of course we're going to need to actually add the letter into this as well. And this is going to need the same width and a text align center. So now if I remove this background red, we can see that when we hover, we get this nice circle effect with the text from the link. So the next thing we're going to want to work on is the spin animation. So to do this, we're going to use CSS keyframes, and we're going to want at 0% it to have no rotation, so 0 degrees, and then once it's 100%, we're going to want it to rotate 360 degrees. Now we can add this on to our circle text sort of holder. And we're going to set this to be 5 seconds and infinite so that it continuously spins, and we'll add linear so there's no jumps. Now, as you can see, the text is spinning, but it does look like we've got a few numbers slightly off as it's not spinning perfectly on the center. So to fix this, I'm just going to add a width of 25 pixels and a height of 25 pixels, along with an orange background color so we can see where the element is. So I'm going to add a position of absolute and set this to be the top of our cursor. I'm also going to add in a transform origin of center, and I'm going to do the same thing on the circle letter. I've also just gone in and quickly updated the top position of the circle letters, so now it is 100% in the center, so we can remove these backgrounds and we've got the text perfectly in the center. I do quite like using background colors on things like this to kind of debug why they're not working, because without that you wouldn't really be able to work out kind of what's going wrong. So the next thing we're going to work on is the cursor icon. So I'm first just going to add in a cursor icon map so that we can map each one of the navigation elements to a icon. And we're going to be using Font Awesome to pull in the icons. So for the home one, we're going to have FA House. For services, we're going to use FA Bell, and then for about, we'll have FA User, and then for contact, we will have FA Envelope. So we're going to add this in the same way that we've got the circle text being added. So we're going to want to create a new element, so we'll call this icon. And we're going to want to add the class list of our Font Awesome icon, and then also we're going to want to add the specific icon from the icon map. And we're going to want to add there. So then we're just going to add this to a new a div that we're going to add called cursor icon. And then we'll set up a reference to it at the top. And then down here, we can just add the icon to the cursor icon. We're also just going to add in some styles for the cursor icon so that the icon is perfectly in the center. And of course, what we're going to want to do is import Font Awesome. now, as you can see, we've got the icons, but similarly to all of the other things, we've forgotten to clear the icon when this first runs. So now you can see we've got the home for home, the person for about, the little bell for services, and we haven't got the envelope. And we've also got the envelope for home. And the last effect that I'm going to add is the blend mode that we had on the code pen. So in Cursor, we can add the mixed blend mode as difference. And now when we hover, this gives us this nice sort of black and white contrast between the things that between the cursor and the hover text. So that concludes my tutorial on how to make this circle text hover effect. If you've got any more questions, leave them in the comments, and if you want to see more tutorials similar to this based on code pens, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.